believe it's 7 o'clock. Let's go ahead and start the work session for the Raymore City Council for Monday, June the 18th. We have 6 members present. And the first item on our agenda tonight is the Herald Estates asset acquisition request. However, at the request of the council members from that ward who are not present tonight, we are holding off on that particular topic until a later work session. And so we'll move on to item B, Tobacco 21. And I believe the staff has did some additional work and prepared the ordinances should we choose to move forward with regard to that. I'll turn it over to Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, sir. And I will turn it immediately over to Mr. Zur to discuss the work that we did on this.
Thank you, Mr. Fearborn, members of the council, mayor. You will find within the packet in front of you a proposed ordinance for the Tobacco 21. This was presented at a former work session by Dr. McCandless and one of the individuals from the Cass County Health Department. We've incorporated the proposed language. Basically, the 30,000-foot look at this is if adopted, you will be adopting language that will allow for incorporation of electronic cigarettes, vapor cigarettes, and tobacco delivery products. And the other aspect of it will be requiring age 21 for sales of tobacco products within the city of Raymore. That would be the quickest overview of the proposed ordinance, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions that you might have.
And what staff would be requesting is direction from the city council as to whether or not you want this ordinance in its existing format to be brought before you for your consideration next Monday night.
Well, I'd open it up for discussion if anybody wants to offer any at this point. Mr. Berenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't discuss the merits or the pros or cons of this, but I do support bringing it to the council for a vote.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to discuss the merits either. I'm just kind of curious why 21 is what the recommended age is. Why not 26?
I'm happy to take it, Mayor.
Yeah, Mr. Zimmer.
Based upon the information provided during the work session on this from Dr. McCandless, they have national statistics that they were able to produce that showed if an individual did not start smoking by the age of 21, they had an extremely high propensity of not beginning smoking for the rest of their life. 21 appeared to be the break point between individuals that became lifelong smokers versus those who did not. So the 21 is a age that was adopted and has been adopted by a number of the other surrounding communities in Missouri, and so they are pushing it forward as a Tobacco 21 process for it. So that's the basis for the 21.
Ms. Burke.
Just a discussion from my observance of I've been working with 14 to 18-year-olds here in Raymore for about 20 years. And in the last year, I can't remember if it was 60, it was between 60 and 80 14 to 17-year-olds that were caught mostly with electronic cigarettes at school, and they were using them in the middle of the library or sitting down in the hallway next to their locker or in the doorway of the bathroom, not hiding. And it's interesting that it seems like they don't see that source of nicotine is the same as another source of nicotine. And it's been a very interesting thing to and then go back and talk to my father, who taught in the early 70s and talked about back when they had smoking lounges in high schools, and just comparing and contrasting some of the differences in today's world and some of the challenges they had earlier. And I would certainly welcome this to be on the agenda.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Mr. Circo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, without getting in depth, I guess I was doing some research on this, and actually me and Mr. Barber were talking about the age requirements on vapes or electronic. When I went on and looked, actually they do recommend or have a state ordinance like smoking 18 in Missouri, and most states is 18. So there is an ordinance or law from the states, and most of them, that you're not supposed to buy, sell, or use like cigarettes until you're 18. So I think sometimes when I look at this, and we start talking about changing ordinance or laws and increasing, sometimes I look at, we got to be more tough on punishments for the ones who violate it, whether it's the seller, the buyer. I think sometimes it's, we'll do a small deal here and a small thing here, the second offense, third offense, but maybe you need to be tougher on some of the ordinances. Maybe being tougher would actually stimulate less sales and less usage if we'd actually be tougher on the actual laws and the ordinances that are on the books in the state of Missouri. But I know they want Missouri. Now, I looked at Missouri, and basically Missouri, Kansas City, St. Louis, Columbia, Jeff City, then some northern cities up north of us, basically in the state, are doing 21. The rest of them are still sitting on the state 18. And it's kind of puzzling to me. Jeff City, the city went to 21, but the state capital in the state stays at 18. So obviously the state hasn't pushed forward, and 46 states are still at 18. But I think maybe tougher regulations, tougher mandates on the laws that are on the books for selling, using. You know, I don't know what we could do, because kids use it, and I know, like I always tell people, you know, growing up and even today, people say, I'm 21, I'm going to get a drink. But you never hear anybody say, I'm 18, I can't find, I'm behind a pack of cigarettes. It's just not common, and I think, like I've talked to Mr. Burke before, it seems like there are so many young people, by the time they're 18, they've kind of made up a decision if they're going to smoke cigarettes, chew tobacco, do these new vapes and electronics. They're already putting their mindset to do these way before they hit 18. So sometimes I think when you start looking at an ordinance or a law and you start looking at mandate or changing it, it can be kind of conflicting on this tobacco thing. Seeing that most states, 46, still have an 18 age limit. But again, I just did some research, kind of figuring out the pros and cons, because I know we've talked about it before. But I think I'm more worried about vapes and electronic cigarettes and all the chemicals they're adding to them, and it looks like they're trying to take the lead over regular tobacco. Nowadays, it's becoming such a thing to do for everybody, young people, older people, everybody's doing vapes, and they keep on adding more horrible stuff to them. So I think I worry about the vapes in the next 5 years, where they're going to go electronically, and if we don't stop and really we have harsher punishment, maybe harsher on some of the laws or the rules we have, even as a city, to make sure people understand they must check everybody, make sure you're not selling. So it does get a conflict.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's something to think about, something to talk about, but there's a lot that goes on, and like I said, a lot of the stuff's the bigger counties, the bigger cities, but like I said, except for 4 other states, there's 18 as the state limits, so I don't know.
Yeah,
Something
well,
to
even
think
with
about.
the
Yeah.
18-year-old, I thought Mr. Burke brought up a good point at the last work session, where he talked about how the 18-year-olds have such an influence on the younger crowd because they're still in school together. And if they have access to it, legal access to it, they can have a tremendous influence on the other high school kids that are, and that's generally the time and the period where people are influenced to use this particular product. I thought he made a wonderful point about that, and oftentimes it's the younger kids are showing up late to class because they try to sneak a smoke in a bathroom or something, and so their tardiness end up in detention. So it's, I thought it was, and I've even talked to Mayor Stark, and she's willing to propose this ordinance in Peculiar as well, which will be enforceable on the campus there. So it's, I think it's the wave of the future, and that's why I asked Dr. McCandless to come speak to the group about it. Anything we can do to discourage our children from smoking, I think, is a good cause. I think Mr. Kellogg had his hand up first. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Circo just brought up a question for me, and I'll apologize, you and my colleagues tonight. I'm kind of out of my mind. But one thing that he did say that I caught on to, and I would ask for clarification, I'm glad Jonathan is here, is state law. What is state law on this? And does state law specifically allow us to have more stringent requirements than what state law is stating?
The analysis I would provide for you is state law establishes the minimum of 18. The cities have been able, but it doesn't identify it as a totally preempted area of the law either. So the cities have gone about increasing it to the age of 21. I think the last count, and I think there are at least 4 or 5 municipalities north of us that have adopted it as a 21.
20.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
That was,
Thank you.
thanks, sir.
The reason why I asked this is because I remember a few years back, I remember a colleague, Monique Lewis, Councilwoman Monique Lewis, she brought up the topic of texting and driving, making it illegal for 16-year-olds before the state, state law allowed it, but, she felt very strongly about it. And I remember the recommendation is that we were making restrictions stronger than what state law allow, and then we were worried about, civic suits and such like that. So that's kind of why I'm asking this question. I see kind of a parallel there. I guess, I could editorialize all night tonight. Mary, you know what I'm going through. And I can go on and on and on. I don't see it, I mean, if we think that this is going to influence a 15-year-old kid that's very similar to the way I was, we're just making ourselves feel good. It's a warm, fuzzy feeling, and I'm sorry for being that way. But, I'm willing to go for this. I see the need. I see the need, but quite frankly, a bullheaded 16, 15, 17-year-old kid, just like what I was in high school, and quite frankly, Joe, I would have been one of your students multiple times. I think there's room for more than just this. This is not a fix at all, that's for sure. And quite frankly, I'm not sure if there is one. If there was, I wish it would have happened 35 years ago. I wouldn't be going through what I am right now with what I am. So, thanks.
Mr. Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of quick questions, and may require staff to give us some report back during that council session. When Dr. Canlis was here during the work session, it was explicitly stated this is not a possession, policy. We're not going to be enforcing any possession type of laws. But as I read through the recipient part, to me, the slippery slope between obtaining and obtained, it leads it to catching them or identifying it in the act. How would you enforce that particular portion of it? Which leads to my other question, enforcement and the training that was brought up before by Dr. Canlis and the health department representative that was here. There would be training sessions in lieu of for the individual as opposed to fines, excuse me. And in that aspect, we're the first city within the county to adopt an ordinance such as this. So who bears the cost of funding that training if it doesn't, or creating that training if it doesn't exist?
Go ahead, sir.
Like any training that we would do, the city bears the cost of training. It would be minimal. We do, while with alcohol, we do certain enforcement measures. It's primarily a complaint-based. We hear that a particular location, it's just kind of common sense. We hear a particular location is selling to minors, and so we run an enforcement operation there. Actually, questions that I had asked about to the chief when we were going through the ordinance. The other item was concerning stiffer penalties. The problem with stiffer penalties is, of course, anything that goes through the courts in this day and age, if it's a misdemeanor, you can't touch it as far as doing any sort of an escalation clause or anything like that. So training seemed to be the best way to go about any sort of a response to to somebody who was in violation of this. We always first go after sellers. If somebody was walking down the street and they appeared to not be 21 years old and they had a pack of cigarettes in their pocket, I do not believe our officers would pull them over and ask for an ID check. Yes. So it will be the sellers.
Okay. And then last question. When a convenience store that's authorized to sell alcohol and tobacco, for my education, are they automatically given signage, the applicable legal signage that's required for that?
They're not given the signage, but there is required signage, and now the required signage is 18 years old. That would change to 21.
So my question is, who bears the cost of that? Is it the city or the proprietor?
That is the proprietor.
Okay.
Mr. Circo.
Oh, yeah, I just want to bring it up for discussion, both sides, that's all I was doing. Like you said, you're talking about enforcement, it would be so difficult. Let's say we pass a law, it's Raymore 21, Belton hasn't got on board, 18s are buying them at 18, and they're coming here, what are you gonna do? They legally bought them, they legally had a right to have them, because our law, so it could be, quite a slippery slope on that, so it'd be very hard to enforce. Young kids you're walking with cigarettes or vapes, yeah, I understand that.
Anyone else? Yeah, Mr. Burt.
If I could say one more thing, I think if it was just strictly nicotine and it was in a drink, I don't think anybody would have a problem with it. It's very similar to caffeine. The addiction rate is high, just like caffeine is. But what is interesting, one of the vice principals is a former chemistry teacher, and myself, we used to teach, and I taught basic chemistry. And we did a lot of research on this about 4 or 5 years ago, and in order to put the nicotine into a liquid, one of the two major solvents that they used to use a lot of polypropylene alcohol, which is a major component of antifreeze. That there is a safe component that they can use, but they also used to use a lot of formaldehyde. And when the formaldehyde was the #1 solvent to get the nicotine into a liquid in order to vaporize it, that was a huge concern for me. If I wouldn't want anyone to sit and breathe formaldehyde more than they did in my anatomy class. But to me, those are some of the things that I worry about more with cigarettes, the other things that are in it, not necessarily the actual nicotine itself. I think if we were in a totally different universe, maybe caffeine would be not allowed for people under 18. And maybe nicotine, if it was in a gum or something, people wouldn't think it was a big deal. But it's definitely the after effects of doing this for years that I think we're concerned with.
Anyone else? If not, we'll see it on the agenda next time then.
Very good, sir.
And that brings us to item C. I didn't make a copy, but so I'll go ahead and read off the candidates that I'm proposing for commission appointments and reappointments. Under the Arts Commission, and you guys can, I'll pass this around, you can take a look at it. But the first was Robert Berry, who's already a member at large on the Arts Commission. That will be a reappointment. Lauren Jones, who's an at-large member of the Arts Commission, will be a reappointment. On the Park Board, we've got Michelle Hiles-Seamers. She's an at-large member of the Park Board and will be reappointed. Jim Heath, Ward 3, reappointment. Eric Eastwood, Ward 1, reappointment. Their new appointments will be Rich Bartow in Ward 3, replacing Bill Manson, and Ryan Supple, Ward 1, replacing Sheldon Castleman. And I have their applications attached to the packet if you'd like to take a look at those. I had, for the both of those commissions and boards, I did have the staff member, Mr. Ike and Mr. Mustine, do more research on all the applicants that we had within our cadre of applications, and those were their recommendations. It's kind of been our policy that if there aren't any real issues going on with an individual, that if they're still interested in serving, that we will reappoint. It's just kind of been a long-standing history with us. So they both wanted to be reappointed or continue to serve, as well as the 3 reappointments on the Park Board. We had to replace Mr. Manson and Mr. Castleman due to their resignations, and those were the individuals that, when Mr. Mustine checked in with them and are active with the Park Department already, that he recommended. So I was going to go with those. If anyone has any suggestions between now and next council meeting, let me know, okay? With any questions with that, Mr. Circo?
If I could go back, just one I forgot to ask. if we make this ordinance legal 21, does that also include the vapes and electronic cigarettes?
Yeah.
All tobacco and electronic?
That
Yeah,
code would be changed
I
to
was-
read exactly
Yeah,
that.
okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Anything else, anybody? And I don't think we have any other business, unless somebody else has something other. If not, we have nothing for executive session, so we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.